welcome back to the Comics Alliance podcast, presented by ComicsAlliance.com, your source for comic book entertainment culture, news, humor, and commentary. I am Comics Alliance Senior Editor Andy Khouri, and I'm joined in this episode by fellow Senior Editor Caleb Goellner, Senior Writer Chris Sims, and Staff Writer Andrew Wheeler. On the table this week, an Asian American advocacy group petitions Marvel to cast its Iron Fist, a blonde Caucasian kung fu master in the comic books, with an Asian American actor in the forthcoming Netflix series. After decades of waiting, there is to be a live-action film based on the 1980s iconic and outrageous animated series JEM and the Holograms, which will be crowdsourced to some degree via Tumblr. Finally, the group analyzes a controversial Nerd HQ crowdfunding campaign undertaken by actor Zachary Levi, who hopes to raise $1 million to produce an off-site celebrity charity event during San Diego Comic-Con. Andrew Wheeler, you wrote about the Iron Fist petition to make him an Asian American in the Netflix show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting approach to take, because when they first announced the Netflix deal, my immediate thought was, oh, they should. This is a great opportunity to recast the character of Danny Rand, Iron Fist, with an Asian actor. And then I thought, oh, wait, hang on. If you make every kung fu superhero, every martial arts superhero an Asian guy, isn't that a bit cliche? So I don't think I said anything about that in my original post on the Netflix deal back in November. But then this petition came around, organized by Keith Chow of Nerds of Color and 18 Million Rising, which is a website for advocacy of Asian American and Pacific Islander interests, in which they called for the same thing. They called for an Asian American actor, and specifically Asian American rather than Asian, to be cast as Iron Fist in the Netflix TV show. So I thought, well, I'll get in touch with Keith and see what he thinks about the martial artist sort of cliche and why he thinks this is a good idea. And Keith had some great responses, which you can read in the article on the piece, which I'm sure we'll have a link to. Basically saying, look, this is part of our culture. Martial arts is part of our culture, and if you make the actor Asian American, so he is both Asian and American, he has that outsider thing that Danny Rand has. He's still culturally American, going to Kunlun, but it's also part of his background, part of his upbringing. So it makes sense. It's a good way to address the problems of the character, that he is a sort of white savior cliche, that he is the best at kung fu, but he's a white guy.
The idea of making him Asian American with respect to the fish out of water component is very dramatically compelling too, I think, because it becomes a story of a very American story, I think, because of our nature as a nation of immigrants and the tensions we sometimes feel when we encounter elements and people from the motherlands that our families came from, especially as generations go by. And I say this as a first generation Arab American, there is a tension and there is a sort of disconnection, and when you're sort of faced with it, it does become like a dramatic, introspective moment that the Danny Rand of the comics has never had. Yeah,
I think there's a knee-jerk tendency to think, oh, if he's Asian, and if he's white, he's American. Like that's where a lot of the sort of negative fan response comes from. There isn't that understanding and that perception that the immigrant experience, or being first generation, second generation, is a compelling story and makes a person American. You know, that's a very true thing, that immigration is a big part of the American identity. And a lot of the comments that you get are people saying things like, well, Shang-Chi, he's Asian American. Well, no, he's not. He's Chinese. He was born in China of Chinese parents.
He's the son of Fu Manchu.
Yeah, he's pretty Chinese. So, like, that is not Shang-Chi does not stand in for the Asian American experience.
There-
In the same way that Black Panther doesn't stand in for the African American experience. He's African. It's not the same thing, and a lot of white dudes get confused about that.
I'm a huge fan of Iron Fist. I think of the ComicsAlliance staff. I mean, I don't know your tastes in Bronze Age comics, Andrew, but like I am a huge Power Man and Iron Fist fan. It's one of my favorite comics of all time. And I love the original Iron Fist. I love the original Power Man. I love it when they come together. And the thing is, I don't think you really lose anything if you make Iron Fist Asian American. There's still that aspect of him being an outsider that is maybe not as visually apparent, but again, I think the trade-off for that is that you do get to do a much more interesting, much more modern take on that story, like Andrew was saying. So, I mean, and you don't lose the visual contrast with Luke Cage when they inevitably become Power Man and Iron Fist, Heroes for Hire, which I hope happens because it's amazing. You don't lose the visual contrast with Danny Rand and Misty Knight. You don't lose anything visually just by making him Asian American as opposed to another blonde, blue-eyed white dude in the vein of Captain America and Hawkeye and Hank Pym.
And is it a component of Danny that he's wealthy?
Yeah, he's a billionaire. His father owns a massive corporation.
I mean, this is another cool thing about it, is that for that to happen, his family would presumably have to have been in America for a long time, which would just separate him further from the sort of motherland, notion, which would just, enhance that outsider thing. And I think that's, as I said, something that hasn't been in the Iron Man comics before, which would maybe even make him a better character and a better story.
Iron Fist.
I think so.
What I said.
And there's a
Man.
huge risk.
It's also not been in the Iron Man comics.
I beg your pardon.
There's a huge risk when they decide to do Iron Fist as a TV show that it is just going to be a white guy goes to Asia and look at all the crazy dragony shit. And, that's dangerous territory to be stepping into. It's very... it fits very well with that 70s kung fu exploitation cinema thing. We have evolved beyond that now, I think, and you do not want to be retreading that ground in that tone.
Yeah, I mean, look, I love like blaxploitation movies and kung fu movies from the 70s. The things I love about them are not that John Saxon gets billed ahead of Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon. Like, that's not the part of that I want back.
Well, they're also not going to do it better than that stuff anyway.
No.
It's... They can try to do a kind of a modern Netflixy version of it, or they could do something really cool. And I think you might challenge this, but I think so far, when given the chance, Marvel has opted to do the cool thing with respect to their live action properties, with the notable exception of what we talked about last time, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Mm-hmm.
So...
I think almost as important as getting an Asian American, actually more important than getting an Asian American to play Danny Rand would be, I think, to get an Asian American showrunner who can exhibit those sensitivities. But I would like to see both. They haven't yet announced who is going to be the writer, director, showrunner for the Iron Fist show. They have for the Daredevil show, which is the first one they're producing. Iron Fist will be the third one, but they will probably cast him. I don't know. I wonder if Danny Rand will crop up in the Daredevil show at some point.
What's the that would be a good way to introduce him, because again, Daredevil is a redheaded, blue-eyed martial arts ninja master.
Yeah.
So it's not like they don't have one already.
Catholics make great ninjas, Chris.
That is true.
I went to a convent dojo when I was a boy.
That's a good origin story.
Also announced this week, the JEM and the Holograms live-action movie, which is, I know, a big deal for certain members of the Comics Alliance staff. This project is especially exciting and sort of surreal in that it is going to be involving Tumblr directly, and which is the medium through which JEM's legacy has survived these many years. Chris Sims is a big JEM and the Holograms fan. Chris Sims, why don't you tell us a little bit about this news and why it matters?
Well, first of all, Andy, I want to say that much like my expertise on Batman has made me a Batmanologist, the term for someone who is an expert on JEM is, I believe, Gem Girl. As in, me and my friends are Gem Girls. Gem is my name. Yeah, I love JEM. I'm excited about this. And the thing that I'm really excited about is that it is directed by John Chu, who is the director of G.I. Joe Retaliation, which, while not a good movie, was a completely insane movie involving Cobra Commander launching nuclear missiles from South Carolina. So I am very excited. I kind of like the cartoons, JEM and G.I. Joe and Transformers and Inhumanoids. Those all took place in the same universe. So I'm kind of hoping...
they did?
Yeah, all those cartoons take place in the same universe. The common denominator is Hector Ramirez, who is a TV journalist who has a show called 20 Questions that shows up on all 4 shows.
Wow.
So there is a unified Hasbro universe between those shows.
That is marvelous.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I'm kind of hoping that John Chu's JEM movie takes place in the world where Zartan was president for 2 years. And there was almost a world-ending nuclear holocaust that started at Fort Sumter in Charleston.
Tell me the basic premise of JEM and the Holograms first.
Okay, so JEM and the Holograms is about Jerrica Benton. Jerrica's father runs a recording company called Starlight Records, and he's also a technologist who invents a supercomputer that he bases the supercomputer's personality on his dead wife, which is revealed much later in the series. He dies. He leaves the secret supercomputer to Jerrica. Jerrica makes the extremely logical decision to use this supercomputer to become a rock star with a secret identity in order to raise money for the orphans that she's raising, because she's raising like 20 orphans. She forms a band with... It's never brought up, but Kimber is her sister, and then the rest of the holograms, Shayna and Aja, are, I believe, her adopted sisters. I think they were also raised by Jerrica's father. I'm not sure on that. Anyway, she becomes a rock star with a secret identity. There's no reason at all for her to have a secret identity, but she does. And she gets into scrapes with a rival band called the Misfits, whose songs are better, and who try to murder her frequently. There is one episode where they literally tie Kimber up and leave her in an active volcano. So
they're like the Team Rocket of JEM.
They are very much the Team Rocket of JEM, but like more competent and felonious.
I see.
I'm super excited about this. I think that it's the Tumblr thing is mind-boggling.
Okay, explain the Tumblr thing.
They asked John Chu, as well as the producer and the person who's supervising the music, they asked for people to submit videos of themselves, photos of themselves, singing, dancing, acting, designing costumes, all via Tumblr. So it looks like they're going to actually try to cast this movie, I guess, based on fan submissions. I don't know if that's accurate, and I don't know how far they're going to be. Like, I don't know if someone on Tumblr is actually going to be playing Jerrica Benton in this movie. If they're going to go that far with it. If they do, this is going to be nuts.
I mean, it seems pretty obvious then that JEM and the Holograms is going to be Betty Fallon and Kate Leth and that pink-haired girl they hang out with. And
I think they would actually be really good misfits.
Oh,
especially Bethany.
Oh, okay.
The joke I made was that Bethany was practicing shouting at Eric Raymond on a video.
We wanted Bethany here today to talk, but she's
She's not, so I can
She's
talk
not.
as much smack as I want.
Go for it.
There has also been the piece of news that Christy Marx, who is the original creator of Jem and the Holograms, who has recently been working for DC Comics, will not be involved. She was the one who created and developed the character. She wrote over a third of the original series. She wrote 26 out of, I think, 63 episodes. And she is not going to be involved. Now, from a legal standpoint, all those characters are owned by Hasbro, just like all the Marvel characters are owned by Marvel Studios and Disney. All the DC characters are owned by Warner Brothers. There's no legal obligation to have Christy Marx involved. That said, it feels weird that she's not involved in any way. I know that when they did the first G.I. Joe movie, The Rise of Cobra, this is something I mentioned in a post on ComicsAlliance, when the first draft of the script leaked and everyone hated it, they brought in Larry Hama to act as a consultant.
Who wrote the bulk of the G.I. Joe series.
He wrote every issue except one.
Yeah.
Which was written by, I believe, Steve Gerber. I might have that wrong. It's the issue about Clutch. It's good. But they brought in Larry Hama as a consultant, and I don't think it made G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra a good movie. G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra is a kind of terrible movie, but it's also a movie I enjoy. So I think that's down to Larry Hama.
But it's also a sign of respect.
Yeah, and like that's which I think they should do. Like I think Christy Marx is I think very valuable in shaping those characters. I think she should be involved in some way.
Her remarks were made in public, and she said that she was notified by a publicist, I think, for either the studio or Hasbro. They should give that publicist a raise for helping get in front of this, because
because they didn't want her to find out when the actual announcement.
How often does that even happen? How often do we hear about the sort of creators of these things finding out, through the press that things are happening to their work that they're not obliged to be involved in, and it goes very badly. At least Christy Marx had an opportunity to speak with the director, I think she said. And
she spoke to John Chu, and she was very complimentary about him. She said that his passion for Jem was very real and sincere. And I think, I don't think that it was much like John Ostrander's recent column about Amanda Waller. Everything Christy Marx said came from, I think, a very honest place and a very fair place, in that she was talking about how she worked so hard to create Jem and then not being involved in this. She was like, yeah, I'm hurt. Anyone would be hurt by that. It wasn't a screw you, Hasbro, screw you, movie studios. It was, obviously I want to be involved in this, and I'm not. I feel like I'm being shut out. But she was very complimentary to John Chu. I do hope she ends up being involved in some form or another. I'd like to see that, just as both a fan of Jem, as a Jem girl, and as someone who believes in creator rights, for lack of a better term. I don't think she's under any illusions as to the fact that she was doing work for hire for Hasbro and an advertising agency, which is how they created toy cartoons back then. But at the same time, she was a very valuable figure for them. So I'd like to see that.
It would also be nice, because if you saw the video with the director and his collaborators talking to the fans about the Tumblr thing and all that, there were no women in that video, and this is a distinctly female-centric concept and story.
Yeah, Jem's main characters are women. The antagonists are women. It was, obviously a show that was directed at young girls. For good or ill, it was about glamour and glitter and fashion and fame. And I think it's very progressive in terms of, afternoon cartoons from the 80s. If we can get that far. And to be honest, I think G.I. Joe is too in a lot of ways, but that's another conversation for another time. I do think it's weird that there were no women involved in the announcement. At the same time, the announcement was made by 3 people. Director, producer, and music supervisor. That is a very small number of people of who will eventually be working on a movie. Like, we don't know who's writing it. We don't know who the producers are. We don't know who the cast is yet. So I'm a little hesitant to put them on blast as far as that goes, just because it's literally the first thing we know about it, and it is 3 people. But I would like to see that improve as it goes on. Like, if we get a year down the road or 6 months down the road, if we get, closer in their filming and it's just, dudes all over the place, I think that is a huge problem.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's
against,
early.
Nothing against those guys. I liked G.I. Joe Retaliation. It had a great fight between ninjas on the side of a cliff and President Zartan. So
I think we're just observing that it was conspicuous.
Yeah.
There is precedent for giving creators roles to play in the film, if only as a mechanism by which to pay them. For example, Jerry Robinson was a consultant on The Dark Knight, and I can't swear to this, but I suspect that he was not, like, on the set every day talking about the Joker. I suspect that was a way to pay Jerry Robinson for creating the Joker.
Yeah, that was one of those. I mean, Jerry Robinson was in 2008. Like, Jerry Robinson was, I don't think, very mobile at that time. I think he was, in a pretty bad way health-wise. But I think that's like one of those clever, hey, let's get Jack Kirby to design the Darkseid toy so we can get him some royalties, sort of thing.
Exactly, and I think that's quite a cool way to handle it, given the the arcane nature of the legalities with these franchises. It would but it's so early yet. It may just be that there was not a place for Christy Marx yet in their as in the current progression of the whole sort of JEM movie enterprise. Yeah,
like, what we know about it is there's 3 people involved and they have a new logo.
Right.
So there's presumably a graphic designer we don't know.
There's a graphic designer, a director, and there's not even a writer, it seems. So it's basically what they've announced is that they have a vague idea for a JEM movie and they have a logo for it. I will say,
if they're going to crowdsource the script on Tumblr, I'm on Tumblr, guys. I can do this. I'll knock this out.
The next thing that we should talk about was kind of was a big deal on Twitter and various blogs, which is the Nerd HQ Zachary Levi Indiegogo campaign, which I've learned a lot about since the initial shit talking, and it's still there's still some important questions I have about this, but I'm just going to set it up for people who don't know what we're talking about. Nerd HQ is a event held concurrently with Comic-Con International in San Diego. It's held at Petco Park, which is the big baseball field where the San Diego baseball team plays. I forget what they're called. I don't expect anyone on this podcast to know the name of that team.
The Padres.
Well, fuck you. I thought
believe it or not, I pulled that one out.
It's kind of like Trickster in the sense that there is Wi-Fi, but there's some. It's like an open space where you can go and play video games, which are provided by corporate sponsors. I think the video games might be new or unreleased yet. There's symposia, which are ticketed. And the money for those tickets goes to charity. There's other fundraising efforts on site, and all the money raised on site goes to Operation Smile, which is a charity that Levi is associated with that helps young children with cleft palates. In the video for the campaign, he explains that the event lost a considerable amount of money last year due to the sort of complexities of corporate sponsorship. It's quite vague. So as such, he's asking fans to fund the event this year, which again, the event is to solicit additional donations on the site, on the day, etc. But his thinking, and I don't think this is really wrong-headed, his thinking is that everyone who's inclined to go to these things or enjoy the panels which are streamed over the internet for free, like if you're at home, you can participate without paying anything. If you're inclined to enjoy the space and the refreshments and the games and the Wi-Fi and so forth, maybe you can kick in $5. I would have paid $5 to help the organizers recreate Trickster, for example, in its original setting, which was directly across the street from the convention, a nice place to go and sit down. There was a little shop where you could buy signed comic books, and there were panels with people you liked. But the difference here is that Nerd HQ is asking for $1 million. There is no explanation of where that money goes. For those of you who've used Kickstarter before, you explain how many thousands of dollars go to this component of the project, how many goes to that, how much has to be dedicated towards rewards, that kind of thing. There's no transparency at all. It's extremely vague. Is the $1 million going to rent out the baseball stadium? Is it going to go pay a DJ for the parties that people can't get into? A film producer and I got into this on Twitter, and he explained to me that there are 3 parties associated with the Nerd HQ event at Comic-Con. One that's open to everybody, one that's just for sponsors, and another one for celebrities. So that's at least 2 parties that fans pay for that they can't get into. And it says, in the event that they do not reach the $1 million goal, they will, quote, evaluate if the event can still be produced with the money contributed, which they get to keep because that's how Indiegogo works. If they don't reach their goal, they still keep whatever has come in. So they can decide if they're going to do it anyway with less money than they say they need, or they return it all. So that's basically the basic premise of this. And this, created a lot of, backlash. Chris Sims, I know you have some thoughts about this project.
Yeah, I think that the thought that I have on it is pretty simple, which is, fuck these guys. You are going to promote your $1 billion movies at Comic-Con, and you want me to pay for your fucking party? Fuck you! I don't even get anything out of it. Oh my god, the stones this requires.
It's a
if I was face to face with someone explaining this idea to me, why they need my money, I would throw coffee in their face.
It's a bad look whenever a celebrity asks for crowdfunding. It never comes off well. And
yeah, look, that motherfucker was entangled. I know he's got money.
He was in Thor, too.
Thor 2.
I like him in both those movies, by the way. But seriously, fuck that guy.
Don't forget Chuck, guys.
Yeah.
I did.
We all forgot Chuck.
Oh no, I chose not to mention it.
None of the $1 million goes to the charity. It's simply
that is the other thing.
It's just to pay for the event, which is, as I described, kind of like Trickster. It's kind of a mini Comic-Con next door to Comic-Con. And then when you get there, you pay more. Over the course of the 2 years they've done this, they've raised just over $400,000 for charity, or $200 a year. Sorry, $200,000 a year. So, on its face, that seems like a business failure to me. $1 million to raise $200,000. This is going to sound kind of rough, but this is an honest question. How come charity has to be part of everything? Do you remember how badly the Womanthology project was complicated by that charity component? Because
people have souls.
They raised $100,000 to produce this book, and they insisted on giving all the money they made. It was really difficult to explain because Kickstarter is not meant to raise money for charity. It's to raise money to fund these projects, and they had to create like a non-profit organization with the government, and it's just, if you know what, how about you make the event self-sustainable, you make essentially a for-profit event, and then you just give whatever's left over to charity. there's this, now they have this complicated two-prong thing, which looks very bad to people on the outside. Chris would have thrown coffee in their face if it was explained to him. Why is it like this?
Obviously, this party is not making money. It's a money sink. And they're paying for, again, like parties for celebrities who could afford to party. Like if you are at Comic-Con promoting a movie, you can afford to have a party. You can throw a party all by yourself, and that's fine. But yeah, like couching it as a charitable thing, when you're telling us, okay, we need $1 million to throw this party, and then we're going to raise $200,000 for charity. Like, why don't you just raise that $1 million for the charity? Like, why don't you just do that? Because what I'm saying is $800,000 going to rich people so that rich people can have a good time.
Well, that's not strictly true. I mean, the $800,000 is going to go pay for whatever it costs to host the event and get the, when it's like when you go there, there's things there. Like it's open. You walk in and out throughout the day, kind of like a gallery, I suppose. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a 4-day exclusive party as such, but the events within it are. You have to have tickets and things like that. And no matter what amount you donate to this Indiegogo, you don't get anything special.
Well, that's good, because there's not like stuff to see during Comic-Con. There's just not nearly enough stuff to go and look at.
Yeah, it's
San Diego.
I've heard people say that Nerd HQ is a really fun thing to do at Comic-Con, but it just seems like there's already Comic-Con.
And doesn't it exist originally to give Zach Levi and his buddies a place to hide out? Like, that was kind of the stated, let's have our own oasis away from the con and make that our like little thing. And let's be cool about it and share it with the world. But like, they made it for themselves first, and then for their fellow nerds second, and for whatever revenue they're generating through the YouTube videos, which each have tens of thousands of views, and of which there are dozens. So they are making some money through those videos, and I don't know where that's gone.
Yeah, and that's fine. Like, look, we all know what it's like to go to Comic-Con. Like, we all know that it's nice to have a place you can go and cool your heels and tape up your bleeding foot, like I had to last year. But I'm not asking anybody else to pay for it. Well, I mean, I am asking someone else to pay for it because my job does pay for my hotel room. But I'm not like out on the street with a bucket telling people to give me $5 each so that I can go get a nice hotel room.
Yeah.
Like, it's nice if they want to do it. I'm just like, don't make me pay for your cool oasis,
especially when there's no perks at all.
Yeah, there is no reward for me. I get nothing.
How about this? Okay, you can use the crowdfunding to pay for everything. Offer some actual reward tiers, like, say, access to all the ticketed events, or access to the parties, or whatever celebrity worshipping thing that people might want to do. Get your photo taken with Nathan Fillion or whatever. And once you've collected all that money, you put on your event, and you take whatever's left over, and you give it to the cleft palate kids. Make it a self-sustaining enterprise, so there will be money to give to charity without having to go, hat in hand. It's just which is already a bad look whenever millionaires do it anyway.
That's the thing that really bothers me, is they're using Indiegogo not as crowdsourcing, but as sort of Patreon. It's really that model. And yet they are both celebrities who presumably have some other income and have something in the bank, and B, they do have a business model. They are putting videos online. They must be making some revenue from that. So they have money and they're making money, and they're asking for money.
Well, he said last year he lost money because sponsorships didn't come
I'm sure
through.
he lost money on the actual organizing the event itself. I don't know where the books balance in terms of what they're making from, they have ways to make money, and if they're not making money, then it's a bad business.
I agree. It's obviously
selling
really complicated.
T-shirts if they're not selling. Yeah. I'm sure it is. And you know, it's great that they, in a way, they're insulating themselves from having to absorb the costs of those tickets that they then pass on to charity. And that sounds great, and that is, you know, great for the charity that they're sending that money to. But they are raising that money by not using the tickets to pay for the event itself, so they're then asking other people to pay for the event itself. Well, that seems very confused to me.
Yeah, that's really the crux of it. And the whole thing would have been avoided if they simply made it like a regular event where where money is raised, or proceeds rather. Proceeds the key word. Whatever's left over, you give to charity.
And if they would just give people a T-shirt for donating, like, no one would have raised an eyebrow.
Yeah, or like if you donate, say, $200, you get like a wristband that gets you into everything all weekend. Or you know, you get, let's say there's like, for the exclusive parties, which, you know, they happen. This is not unique to Nerd HQ. Comic-Con has many exclusive parties that the peasants cannot go to.
Mm-hmm.
This is just, it's become that kind of industry thing. Let's say there's like, you know, 50 wristbands to get into this party, you know, and they each cost like $1,000 or something like that. You know, like right there, that's $50,000 that can help fund, that can help, you know, pay for this thing. And someone gets something out of it. It just makes more sense, you know? Like right now, he's saying, if you give us $50,000, you get nothing. You don't even, you show up on the day with your receipt from Indiegogo saying, or your email, you printed it out, here's your receipt for $50,000 minus PayPal fees and so forth. What's up, Zachary Levi? Nothing. You go get in line. You can go pay for, you can go talk to, you know, Christina Hendricks.
Yeah,
you know, when everyone else does.
And they brand it as a nerd thing, and that really kind of irritates me, because I feel like they're exploiting that sort of willingness to go along to get along, to be seen to belong to something that is a sort of defining characteristic of being a nerd. You want to participate, you want to be recognized as part of a community. So he calls it Nerd HQ, and now, like, if you say anything about that fundraiser on Twitter or anywhere online, someone will hunt you down and they will get you. Because they think they belong to something, because they're supporting this, because they're nerds.
I agree completely. I'm very dubious of this whole brand, which the Nerd HQ is a division or project by the Nerd Machine,
mm-hmm.
and another of which is the Nerd Lounge. I read an article in Fortune about this company when I was trying to figure out this whole situation, and it was, even in the Fortune article, it was very difficult to understand what Nerd Machine actually is. It's a very vague kind of content website that
it's like a church. It's the Church of Nerd, and it's like trying to figure out who's running Scientology right now. You know, it's like, you've written about this before, Andy, especially with the cosplay show, Heroes of Cosplay. Is that the one?
Heroes of Cosplay and Fangasm.
Yeah, and Fangasm and all these shows. It's to the point now where, I mean, all this stuff is great. We all love it. We have a job because of it. We're friends because of a lot of it. But it's all still stuff you can buy. And so up to this, you know, the past couple years, belonging to a community meant you bought stuff with other people and you talked about it and you got along, but you still owned whatever you bought. You know what I'm saying? Like, it didn't own you. I think the shift has become, these companies are telling you that they own you after you pay money to get a thing. You know, it's like, well, you owe us, you're a geek now because you bought, I don't know, the Chuck on DVD or whatever the hell, and now you got to be part of this community. And if you know, you don't want to keep up with the geek culture or whatever, you're out of the club. You're a hater, like, you're a bully, like, whatever. You know, it's really kind of demoralizing. It's something I think about almost every day when you get press releases for this kind of stuff. You know, I get press releases for like geek award shows. It's like, what's the award for? You know, being the biggest geek. Like, what does that even mean?
Being the biggest consumer.
Well, yeah,
or the most popular brand.
That's what
You know?
they're saying.
Yeah.
And so this whole Nerd HQ thing is a symptom, and I mean I would say it's like a disease. It's like a full blown someone should be cutting it out like it's cancer type of situation, at least psychologically. It's
like
are
Andrew
you in
was
the
saying
church
with-
or not? You better pay the dues so you can keep being part of this church. And that's what I'm saying. My metaphor shouldn't be. It's not like an attack on religion, but that's religion is religion. You know, this is buying stuff. You know, this is having fun.
Don't be
with
afraid of
friends.
the religious, Caleb. Be afraid of the nerds. They're the ones that are
That-
going to come for us now.
Fuck
Yeah, man.
nerds.
With
No, but Caleb's right, because if you look at the comments on the Indiegogo page, there are people saying, I donated, $10, $100, even though I can't go to San Diego, because I want people to experience this. I believe in you, Zach. That kind of thing. And he writes about it like he built the fucking Noah's Ark. Listen to this. I truly believe that if you take a moment to actually inspect what it is I'm trying to do, you'll realize that it's truly from my heart. We set out to make Nerd HQ powerful and special in ways that no one had tapped into, and I believe we have done just that. But without your help, it will end up being yet another memory of something that once was. I want to keep bringing you the best that I have to offer. I want to keep fighting for you and your voices and your hopes and dreams in the world of entertainment. But I need your help to do it. You need to believe in the power that you possess. You need to believe that together we can absolutely move the biggest mountains and change the world.
okay,
A collected and unified people are more powerful than any president, any ruler, any business, anything. You need to believe that your voice, your vote, your help, your donation actually means something. I believe
okay.
I believe in you,
God.
and I hope you believe in me.
Here, I need to like say this real
Oh my
quick.
God, I am
So-
shaking with rage right now.
Blessed
So-
are the geek, and they shall inherit the earth.
My church metaphor stops being a metaphor, and I think it's worth pointing out. And this does not speak to. I grew up in evangelical Christian Protestant community. I think Chris did too. I think didn't she spend a lot of time in like youth groups and stuff, Chris, as a kid?
I mean, I grew up in the South, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, this isn't an attack on. I'm not going to say like all that stuff is bad. I mean, like I have feelings about it now that I'm older, where a faith system and perhaps capitalism, when you combine the two, things happen, and not all of them are things that I'm totally cool with or enjoy. But that being said, let's say, for the purpose of what I'm saying, I'm not youth groups fine if you believe what you believe. I'm not going to demonize anything, but I am going to demonize when you try to do this kind of values marketing. What he just said, you could copy and paste it and change a few words, and it's something I heard in youth group about something more valuable than Nerd HQ. I assure you,
It's about your soul.
Well, or just like guys, if it's on your heart to donate to this charity, it'd be like, okay, cool. Like he inspired me to donate to an actual charity, but like what he just said is like a teen youth group sermon at a mega church that I mean, it just sounded like I just had like a flashback. Like I've heard that same type of language like 100 times, and he just copied and pasted it for like this capitalistic enterprise that incidentally kind of gives to charity,
and sections from the Wonder Woman theme tune. He also copied some of that.
Oh, that's in there too?
I gotta say,
Amazing. The Greeks had it then.
Thank God for fucking Johnny Fundraiser over here, because otherwise, where would we get nerd interest represented at San Diego Comic-Con International?
That's the thing. Like
He's protecting a dream.
I'm like
Could
I said,
go to Geek and Sundry like 2 blocks down. I think they're free.
I have a cynical view of this kind of enterprise, but I don't like. I know people who know Zach Levi, and I think his heart is in the right place. Like I don't mean to cast him as a villain, but this is just a bad look, a really bad look, and I think people are right to object to it instinctually. It's coming off like a Pied Piper act. It's coming off like $1 million for a place to for Wi-Fi, you know, at a party you can't get into. Charge a cover at the door like anything else, and have fun. And if you know, feel good about giving the proceeds to charity. That's fine.
I'll cast him as a villain. I'll cast him as a straight up super villain. Because when you're like, hey, we can change the world and let your voice be heard if you just give me money so that me and my rich bros can party. Oh my god.
Well, that's because you're a hater,
I'm
Chris.
so mad right now.
Chris, you're a suppressive person,
And
as a Scientologist might say.
and you're not a real geek, etc., etc.
Yeah, that's fine.
The
No, I don't want to
Thetan
be.
app is off the scale right now. My Skype registers Thetans, and it's a bad scene.
It does remind you of sort of the mindset that was displayed in Fangasm with respect to Stan Lee and all the brands, you know, like just sort of rubbing up against them was like was like touching the divine, you know. It's not a good place for geeks to be when the division, the meaning of that word is dissolving completely because it is so popular and it is just the culture now, you know. Like he's trying to force it. He's trying to put it back in the bottle and make it the special, unique snowflake thing, and it's not. There's over 100,000 people at San Diego every year. You know, it's one of the biggest thing. San Diego, by the way, not for profit, and somehow they managed to make it work. But
do they though? Do they really?
Well, they charge you for a ticket. And you go.
Yeah, but does it work? Does anything at San Diego actually?
And you go and you get into stuff, you know? I mean, organizationally, whatever. But you never see San Diego going to Kickstarter and saying, we can't really afford to do this anymore.
You know, I just gave a dude $50, American, actual money, to draw a picture of me as a Pokemon trainer. I am not above giving money to nerdy bullshit. But the difference is that I got something out of that. I have a product. It was not like I did not just give it to him because I like the cut of his jib and I want him to have some walking around money.
Well, the idea is you'd give the money so they could host the event, host the space, and you could go as much as you wanted. Like I guess it depends. Your mileage may vary on how valuable that is as a product or tangible reward. You know. I will say that they are doing one thing better than Comic-Con itself is, and that is having ticketed events so that people can actually see what they want to see and streaming it for free. That's something Comic-Con should be doing, particularly because it would free up God knows how many bloggers from having to sit in those rooms and write down what people say, which is the most dehumanizing activity, I think, in the 21st century that anyone can do. So
no one is arguing. There was just silence. You just said it like it was truth, and we all just I think we all nodded our heads and took a sip of coffee. After that,
that's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm a little equivocal about it. Chris is fuck the rich. Wheeler is fuck charity. That's what you said, right, Wheeler?
I don't think that's entirely accurate.
Caleb is fuck religion.
And
I
don't know if I said that.
I feel like we solved this problem.
I do not deny myself the title of nerd. I am not anti-nerd. I know, Andy, you have some problems with it. I identify as a nerd. I'm not a handsome movie star. So I feel like there's a slight difference there. But if he's a nerd too, great. He's a nerd too. But he doesn't own it more than I do. And no one defending it owns it more than I do. No one gets to take that away from me because they think it's them. Not everyone that identifies as a nerd has the same power in life. There are now nerds at the top of the chain, and there are still people who don't feel powerful, who don't feel represented, who still see themselves as nerds, as that's part of their identity and that's something that they cling to empower themselves, and they see the successful nerds and they identify with that. But that then means that people in positions of wealth and power, like Zachary Levi, can use that identity nerd to create a sense of community with the people who are still using nerd to try and pull themselves up. And that is a major power differential, and it still exists whether we all call ourselves nerds or not.
I don't understand how it still exists, though, at least insofar as we define nerd as by one's interests, which used to be fringe, and are certainly no longer that.
Right, but if you're a girl with body issues, say, or if you're someone struggling with identity issues, you can make being a nerd part of the thing that helps you find a community. And it's not the nerd thing that's the struggle; it's the other issues. But the nerd thing becomes the sort of the badge you wear that helps you up.
I can understand that, but I don't see how that's addressed by this event.
Oh, it isn't. This event exploits that, but the people who are exploited don't think they're being exploited.
Guys, you're being exploited.
Well, as of this recording on Saturday, the 22nd of March, the Indiegogo campaign for I Want My Nerd HQ, that's actually the name.
What? You ain't going to get it.
You might be right, Andrew Wheeler, because as of today, with 35 days remaining, they've only raised $176,000 and change.
That is still way too much.
The good news is they get to keep that regardless.
That's
the cocaine budget covered.
They said they'll refund it if it's hopelessly not enough.
Hopelessly not enough to them. They're like $17. So I think
they were
that
going to refund it if it wasn't enough. They would have put it on Kickstarter with a goal of like 500,000.
Yeah.
And for the record,
keep it.
The whole Indiegogo model. I mean, that's a whole other conversation.
We don't know. We don't know what they'll do. I'm sure they will give it all back if they don't hit their goal. I'm sure, because they would be monsters not to.
It would be horrible monsters that would justify all this horrible stuff I'm saying.
If they didn't meet their goal and they gave all the money that they raised, either they gave it back and like explained it, or they gave it all to charity, or you had the option like, hey, we didn't make this party. Where do you want the money to go? Do you want it back or do you want to give it to charity? If they did either of those two things, it wouldn't absolve them, but I would be like, well, that was a good choice. That was a good follow-up. But we'll see what they do. And in a couple more podcasts, we may just have some more choice words to say about this whole thing.
And the fact that we don't know what they would do speaks to the fact that this is so badly organized and so badly presented.
Indeed. If it needs to be better defined, it is confusing. We've been talking about so many things that we're not even sure are the case, because that's the information we have to go on.
Yeah, I've seen Kickstarters for like indie comics where they're only raising $3,000. They're bulletproof, like everything is accounted for. It's like they had a lawyer write it. And it's like, oh, well, that's very thoughtful. I mean, like, I fall asleep reading this user agreement, but like I know I'm going to get my comic, and I know that you spent $16 on shipping, or whatever. It's
right.
I've seen people ask for so much less with so much more explanation and facts and all that kind of jazz. And it's wild. There's no other word for it. It's just like, this is a wild, crazy campaign.
I hope no one goes to I Want My Nerd HQ Indiegogo fundraiser thinking that they are indirectly supporting charity.
Well, let's see. The first thing at the top of the page is I Want My Nerd HQ 2014. Nerd HQ, a free 4-day event in San Diego offering celebrity panels, exclusive gaming, and tech experiences while raising money for Operation Smile. And you start scrolling down, paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, paragraph 4. This part is very important. We want to make it very clear that the money you're contributing for Nerd HQ is not going to charity. The funds raised here will pay for the production of Nerd HQ in San Diego this July. 100% of the money raised by the conversations, which is what they call the panels, auction items, photos, and signings will be donated to Operation Smile. Last year they raised $215,000, which again, you think, well, $215,000. You spend $1 million to raise $215,000. That just on its face seems like a business failure to me.
And if you are volunteering money with no expectation of reward, that kind of is charity. So Nerd HQ is kind of setting itself up as its own charity.
Wow.
Because none of this money is going to charity, except it's all going to us. And it's charitable of you to give it to us.
I mean, I don't really think they're like pocketing excess money. I think they're going to spend it all on this event. It's just, is it worth it when they only generate, not even $250,000 for the charity, when they spend $1 million trying to do it?
That I think a charity organizer would consider that a bad return.
Well, if you want to hear more about exploitation of nerds, you can read my Fangasm article about unreality at ComicsAlliance.com, and follow me on Twitter at Andy Khouri, where I complain about this sort of thing almost ceaselessly. Chris Sims, where can people find you?
They can, of course, find me at ComicsAlliance.com every single day of the week, all 7 of them. I'm also on Twitter at the ISB, and you can find other stuff that I do, including the comics that I co-write with Chad Bowers, and the comics that I write all by my lonesome at about.me/Chris Sims. That's ChrisSims.
Andrew Wheeler.
Hello. You can find me, obviously, at ComicsAlliance as well. You can follow me on Twitter at Wheeler, and you can visit my website, andrewwheeler.co.uk. There are two W's in the middle there, don't be confused. And that's where you can find my excellent audio adventure podcast serial, Valentin and the Widow, which I think I just said was excellent. It's excellent. You should check that out.
If you like Andrew's accent and you want to imagine him like narrating a sort of pre-war adventure serial, it's perfect if you like that sort of thing.
In mellifluous tones.
Right. Caleb Andrew Goellner.
You can find me on Twitter at Caleb Andrew, and I do comics at mermaidevolution.com and taskforceradsquad.com. We actually just did a new issue, and you can find links at that website.
Task Force Rad Squad is exactly what it sounds like.
Pretty much, yeah.